Peter had a vision. A sheet came down from heaven. He saw unclean animals, as God said. Arise, kill and eat. And that's how we know we can eat anything we want. But wait, is that really what God meant? Let's break this down.
You're listening to Morgan Cadwell with Wildly Unpopular, where we discuss all things wildly unpopular. This is going to get interesting.
Acts 10 through 17. But he became hungry and wanted to eat. But while they were making preparations, he fell into a trance. And he saw the sky opened, and an object like a great sheet came down, lowered by 4 corners to the ground. And on it were all kinds of 4-footed animals, and crawling creatures of the earth and birds of the sky. A voice came to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "By no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything unholy and unclean." Again, a voice came to him a second time, "What God has cleansed, no longer consider unholy." This happened 3 times, and immediately the object was taken up into the sky. Now while Peter was greatly perplexed in mind as to what the vision which he had seen might mean, behold, the men who had been sent by Cornelius had asked directions to Simon's house, and they appeared at the gate. In Acts 10:17, Peter was inwardly perplexed as to what the vision he saw might mean. He did not conclude that it was about eating anything unclean. In Acts 10 verse 16, it says that he had the vision 3 times. In Acts 10:19 through 20, we see that 3 men came to Peter. Interesting connection. We also see in verse 13, it says, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Then in verse 20, it says, "Get up, go downstairs and accompany them." He was told, "Get up," in regards to the animals, and he was told, "Get up," in regards to the men. He was given the vision 3 times, and 3 men came to see him. Acts 10, verse 28. "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or to visit anyone of another nation. But God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean." And then compare this to verse 16. "And the voice came to him again a second time. What God has made clean, do not call common." Did Peter eat unclean meat with Cornelius and the uncircumcised men in Acts 10? Acts 10:21 through 22. Peter went down to the men and said, "Behold, I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for which you have come?" They said, "Cornelius, a centurion, a righteous and God-fearing man, well spoken of by the entire nation of the Jews, was divinely directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house and to hear a message from you." So wait a minute. Cornelius was a righteous, God-fearing man, and the Jews spoke highly of him? Interesting. What does righteous mean? Upright, righteous, virtuous, keeping the commands of God. Would a righteous man serve unclean meat, particularly a man who was so greatly esteemed by the Jewish nation? Let's not forget, this was a man who respected Peter. Acts 10:25 through 26. When Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter helped him up, saying, "Stand up. I too am just a man." Peter is never mentioned eating any unclean meat, nor does he ever tell anyone else that they can. Peter repeatedly says that his vision is about people, and everyone understood that. Acts 10, verse 15. The voice spoke to him a second time, "Do not call anything impure that God has already made clean." Acts 10:19. You are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. Just revisiting that for a brief moment. Also, Acts 10:44 through 45. While Peter was still speaking these words, the Holy Spirit fell upon all those who were listening to this message. All the Jewish believers who came with Peter were amazed because the gift of the Holy Spirit had been poured out on the Gentiles. Acts 10:34-35. Opening his mouth, Peter said, "I most certainly understand now that God is not one to show partiality, but in every nation the one who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him." Why do we say that Peter must have eaten unclean things while eating with Gentiles, but we don't say that Jesus must have eaten unclean things while he was eating with tax collectors and sinners? It's actually more likely that Jesus was presented with unclean things at his meal with the sinners. Matthew was a tax collector. He was likely rejected at synagogue and at the appointed festivals. He was surrounded by Romans, and it says his friends were sinners. What is the likelihood that he was following Jewish dietary laws? We can't really say for sure, but we know Jesus was able to eat with sinners without partaking in eating of unclean things. We know he followed the law perfectly. If Jesus can eat with tax collectors and sinners without eating anything unclean, Peter could have eaten at the home of a righteous man without eating anything unclean. But what about Matthew 15? Matthew 15:11. It is not what enters the mouth that defiles the person, but what comes out of the mouth that defiles the person. Was Jesus talking about food? Matthew 15, verse 2. Then some Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread." This is the context of the passage. Matthew 15:3. And he answered and said to them, "Why do you yourselves also break the commandments of God for the sake of your tradition?" Matthew 15:7-9. You hypocrites! Rightly did Isaiah prophesy about you by saying, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me. And in vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine the commandments of men." What commandment of men were they teaching as doctrine in this scenario? Hand washing before eating. Jesus' closing statement, Matthew 15:20. But eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. Nothing that is already considered clean by God's law can be defiled by eating it with unwashed hands. And we have one more. Mark 7:19. For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. You see these pretty little parentheses right here. Parentheses equal insertion. But is the insertion wrong? Well, all food was and is clean, because anything considered food is clean according to God's law. And food, which is whatever has already been called clean by God's law, cannot be defiled by unwashed hands. So, all food was declared clean. If you need more of a breakdown, food means cows, sheep, goats, and anything else with a cloven hoof that chews the cud. Things that are not food would be pig, crab, oysters, lobster, rabbit, etc. Check out Leviticus 11. Some of you still aren't convinced, and that's okay. Take some time to search it out for yourselves. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, you are so greatly appreciated. Before you go, don't forget to check the description because I always leave links down there for you guys.